Do you want me to start off now, people?
Yeah.
Yep.
Righty-ho. Okay, so can ordinary people hear us? I hope so. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Robert Davis. I'm chair of the Road Danger Reduction Forum, and welcome to the first of the two webinars we're jointly organising with Road Peace, the National Road Crash Victims Charity. We had planned, as you know, to have a conference, a real-world conference in April, and what with one thing and another, we are now on webinars. So what we're doing is what would have been the morning of the conference is going to be this webinar this afternoon. And next week we will have what would have been the afternoon of the conference, which will be on involving communities specifically in things like low traffic neighborhoods and community speed control. Okay, so the speakers we've got today, first of all, we're going to have a welcome from the RDRF president, Baroness Jones, who was involved with road danger reduction when she was a member of the London Assembly and has carried on her interests since. Then we will have Chief Superintendent Andy Cox. He is now Chief Superintendent with Lincolnshire Police. Official title is Head of Crime, which makes him sound a bit like Dr. Evil, actually. But he's involved with general criminal issues there. He's also the national lead for collision investigation, and he's going to be talking about the work that he was involved with in enforcement as head of the Vision Zero program when he was a detective superintendent in the Metropolitan Police Roads and Transport Policing Command. Have some questions after that. Then we will go to hear a video from Kira Lee of Road Peace, who will be talking about the relevance of Dashcam in her case. We will then have 10 minutes from Bryn Booker of Nextbase Dashcams, talking about Dashcams. For those of you who've got cars, do have a Dashcam. It's very important. It's not expensive, brings your insurance premiums down. We'll then have 10 minutes from Paul Hankham of Madison, who are the importers of Cyclic. That's Cyclic Fly 1 and 2 are bike lights with cameras. And then we will have a session from the legendary Mikey. No, Mike is known as the legendary Cycling Mikey, but we'll just call him Mikey. And thanks to Madison and Nextbase and Cyclic and More Barlow solicitors for sponsoring the two sessions. So now we've got up to nearly 100 of the participants. We should be, we had over 150 registered. We should be having over 100. And so now let's go over to Baroness Jones.
Thank you very much, Bob, and welcome to everybody. It's fantastic for me to be here because I speak to a lot of audiences and most of them are fairly unfriendly, including the House of Lords. So it's lovely to be here with you. And I'm sure most of you noticed that lockdown meant less traffic, fewer cars in particular. But at the same time, the cars that were left on the road were actually driving more dangerously, not all of them, but some of them, and enough to make a difference. And I'm delighted to say that the person who's speaking after me was the person who caught quite a lot of those speeding, dangerous motorists. We've also mentioned that during my time as a London Assembly member, I was involved with Road Danger Reduction Forum, also with Road Peace, whom I'm really glad are with us today as well. And it was a time when traffic police were not very popular, even with the senior police Met officers. And in fact, I saved what they call the black rats 2 or 3 times in my time as an assembly member, just by saying how wonderful they were and pestering the senior Met officers. And Andy, I've got to say, is my favourite police officer. Now, that sounds like quite an accolade, but actually he's the only one I really like. So it's a short list of 1. And he is an amazing police officer because he's not only worked hard on reducing road danger, but he's also told people what he's doing about it. And of course, it's no good doing good things, even in policing, if people don't know what you're doing. And so that has been a change in the Met behaviour and the Met's thinking, which I think he's left behind him. So there are still people doing that. And we've also got Kira Lee, who's going to be talking about the value of the value of road peace and of Road Danger Reduction Forum for supporting people who have lost friends and relatives, husbands, wives on the road because of speeding or dangerous drivers. And then we have a section on how members of the public can report errant drivers through the use of video technology. Now, I would say this is incredibly important, and it's not about grassing, it's not about punishing people, it's about consequences. If you do something stupid and something wrong, most of the time you do expect some consequences. And this is what we have to do for dangerous drivers. It's a case of getting a message across that you just can't behave like this on roads anywhere, not just, you know, on major roads, but on minor roads, on roads that go through suburban areas where children like to play and there's lots of pets, cats and dogs running across the road. So really, speeding is the most incredibly antisocial thing. And I very much support anybody who fights the culture. I can remember a long time ago, in fact, Bob reminded me of this, a London police officer, traffic officer, was actually killed by being run over. I was absolutely furious about this because it is a dangerous job being a police officer. I'm a big critic of the police at times, but it is a dangerous job, and being a roads policing officer is possibly as nearly as dangerous as being one of those officers that carries lots of guns and tasers and things like that. And so I am really happy to say that Andy is coming after me to tell you all about his work. And if you were here with me now, I'd be asking you to applaud him. So if you can all wave your hands or something, and we're going to hear from Andy Cox.
Thank you very much, Jenny. And I think you need to do my introduction every single time I do a presentation after that warm welcome. Thank you, Robert, as well, for the invite, and thank you, Road Peace. All 3 of you, Jenny, I have to say, in terms of, you know, the voice you've given me, probably within the London Assembly and other places politically, and the rest is through social media and all the sort of various guises I speak in, have really helped my influence grow and helped us to make the changes perhaps I'm just about to talk through as well. I have to apologise for my screen. I only arrived just a couple of minutes ago, so I'm on a mobile phone. You're going to be see a lot of my face really close up, so I do apologise in advance for that. But what I wanted to talk through, I suppose, is the change in London, but also potentially what we need in terms of road safety and road policing nationally. So I picked up the lead for Vision Zero at the start of 2019, and I've only just essentially given it up, as you know, last month when I moved to Lincoln. What did I pick up? I picked up a strategy I think that didn't really engage partners, didn't really look outside of London, and had a strategy which focused on, the way I describe this as everywhere, everybody and everything. So it wasn't intelligence led. It would target, you know, basically low risk issues, and it's only got finite resource. So the way I wanted to change it was to make it really risk based, but absolutely communicate. So which is your point just now, Jenny. So if we look at when I started to tweet around the whole road safety agenda in London, I was told to go and get a proper job, go and catch a criminal, stop revenue raising, and all those sorts of comments which myself and my teams found deeply offensive. And obviously then it was a process of education. I think people saw you know, the whole perception of speed was wrong, and the perception of risky driving was wrong, in the sense of, you know, I think everybody has a culture, or not everybody, but an unfortunate amount of people have a culture of nothing's going to happen to me. It's okay for me to speed. It's okay for me to do this thing wrong. It's okay for me not to be insured, etc., etc. It's a very selfish attitude, and it creates risk for all the law-abiding road users and those that want to drive safely and be safe and have their loved ones safe as well. So, and I very much took the view of the whole communication piece, that I spoke to different sets of audiences in my mind when I did the social media stuff, which then led on to mainstream media, led on to presentations, and led on to events like this. But I spoke to 3 different sets of people in my mind. So one was very much the offender, and essentially talking to the dangerous driver and explaining to them that we were there to catch them and the consequences, you know, when we do. And we caught more than ever, which I'll come on to in a minute. One was to talk to basically the public, to let and to support the law-abiding road users, to let them know why we're there, what we were doing, and what we were focused on, and what the areas of greatest risk were. And then was to speak to essentially the bereaved family and victims, to demonstrate support to them, to let them know that we understood really what they were going through, and we were trying to prevent, you know, more families being bereaved as part of our whole work. So we moved to very much, as I say, a strategy of targeting the most risky people, the most risky roads, and the most risky themes. And undoubtedly, the most risky theme, despite what anybody says to you, and whatever you hear, and whatever the DFT data might tell you, the most risky theme, or as I described theme, is speeding. So we did some data research in London, and we think speed is a factor in about half of all fatal collisions. The data would have said previously about 16%, but the data was wrong, and the process for how we collect the data is wrong, and we wanted to reflect that. So when I loudly shouted, and I did shout loudly in fairness around speeding, it was in the knowledge that having seen the fatals come through, seen the life-changing injuries come through, and I oversaw obviously all the fatal collisions in London since the start of 2019, and I knew speed was the biggest factor by miles. So I was confident in saying that, and now the data proves that. And I think this data would be reflected nationally if everybody essentially reviewed it in the way the Met now do. And obviously I'm advocating for that in the right circles, in national sort of meetings and so on. So we moved very much to a speed-based focus, and then we also did the Fatal 4, which, as people will know on this call, as I'm sure everyone on this call is a road safety-minded person will know, that's drink and drug impairment, that's seat belts, failure to wear them, of course, and using a phone whilst distracted at the wheel, together with speeding. But we also focused on uninsured driving, and the belief around uninsured driving is, we know statistically it shows that uninsured drivers are more likely to be involved in a fatal collision, and this is the really significant point as well, they're far more likely to be criminally active. And one of the things I was keen to move this agenda to was, this is both tackling road safety and tackling crime. So it's not probably unsurprising to anybody on this call, the link to crime and bad driving. So when we move on to creating our road crime team, which came later in 2020, the name was really carefully chosen. It is symbolic, but then words matter. So including the word crime in a road policing sense was really important to the strategy. So then we had COVID. So I just want to talk a little bit about COVID. So that probably gave road policing its moment. You know, certainly I think up and down the country, people suddenly start to talk about road safety. I think they recognise the link to risky driving, the NHS, emergency services, hospitals, and then COVID-19. So unsurprisingly, if you drive badly, you put more people at risk of depriving the NHS from treating COVID-19 patients and so on. So I think it had a moment around that, and we had some absolutely outrageous speeds during the COVID period. But it really shouldn't be. Whilst as I say, road policing had its moment and got a voice probably for the first time in a long time on the national mainstream media. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that really those speeds were not necessarily out of kilter with what we normally experience. So, but what we were doing in London is we've changed our strategy to very much focus on speeding. So unsurprisingly, we catch far more speeders because we're focused on the issues that matter most. So to put that into context, when I left, and the last time I checked the data was in August, we enforced around about 22,000 offences for speeding this year. And that's just boots on the ground enforcement. It isn't through our cameras, but 22,000 offences this year. And to put that into context, so that was in August. The highest previous ever years, the highest ever year was 12,000. So by the end of the year, assuming that strategy's been pursued now, and assuming that we've still got the same robust approach around this, then I'd expect to achieve obviously somewhere around perhaps 30,000. So we'd have nearly tripled what our previous best year. And I think that needs to be replicated nationally. And we need far more focus on speed enforcement than we've got. We need to win the debate with members of the public who seem to think it's us targeting law-abiding road users. We need to explain to them that more people die, sadly, on the road in a collision than they do through murder or terrorism combined. And that's been the case every year that I can remember. And I think moving that slightly further forward, you start to talk about the speeds we experience. We experienced in London on a tea time that weekend 163 miles an hour. Sussex experienced 200 miles an hour during the day. We had 134 in a 40. We had 110 in a 30. And I think it was 84 in a 20 was the highest. And that was just a snapshot during 2020 of the highest of that year. What we did do, very much focused largely to support vulnerable road users. So in the past, 20 and 30 mile an hour enforcement had perhaps been relatively light, and the Met had focused largely on your faster roads and just more broad enforcement. But when you do the data, 20 and 30 mile an hour zones are the zones which are most likely to have a killed and serious injury collision. The data backs us up on that. And actually, why your vulnerable road users are most likely to be present, so cycling and obviously pedestrians. So we did a huge amount in 20 and 30s. We did that with an analytical product, Inform and Where We Go. So we were identifying the most risky roads and risky times, and obviously patrolling them at the right time, at the right place, and being intelligence-led, as I said, around that, with a huge increase of 20 and 30 mile an hour enforcement. And a lot of these were extreme speeders, and the term extreme speeder was coined by one of my colleagues during the pandemic. And essentially the thinking behind that was an extreme speeder is somebody that can only go to court because the level of their speed is so high it doesn't warrant or justify any other punishment than a court punishment. But I have to say the court punishments, and I have used this analogy many times, are too light. So if we look at what Theresa May is doing nationally at the moment, she's put forward a bill to raise the sentencing option of 14 years for death by dangerous to life. Something I really support. I've met families who have been frustrated by the fact that the death of their loved one, the person can only be sentenced as a maximum to 14 years, and we know it's so often less, and they serve a lot less than that as well. But for me, whilst that's really good, and I really support Theresa May for doing that, it's reactive, and we need to be proactive. So if I draw a quick analogy, so we've got an analogy of a person carrying a knife in the street, gets stopped by police before they use it. That person can rightly, I stress the word can, not always will, or it's not always appropriate to do so, but can be sentenced to prison and get a lengthy sort of strong sentence attached to that. But even though they haven't used the knife, but they've been stopped by us before they use it. If I then draw the link to the speeding driver, so somebody that does 163 miles an hour and a tea time in London, we can't put them in prison, and their sentencing options are very low. Essentially, it's going to be at best a disqualification. That's going to be for a relatively short period of time, and we can't take their vehicle, for example. And I just think when you draw the comparisons around the risk and the devastation that can be caused, it's just not good enough really from a legislative position. So I really, I'm advocating as best I can, and I'm sure I've bored people's senses in sort of national circles around. We need to change that. We need to improve that, and we need to send out the right message, because I think deterrence is a very big part of everything we do. And I think actually once you potentially control the speeding epidemic that we have, then obviously everything else would come significantly down, in my view, in terms of life-changing injuries and the fatal injuries as well. And just whilst I continue on speed, and I will touch on some other bits quickly. So I use the analogy, I know this is not new and it wasn't first used by me, but why reinvent the wheel? We do need to make speeding socially unacceptable. Drink driving has been for pretty much all my adult life, and rightly so, but speeding's not. And I think many people in sort of society will sit in a car with a speeding driver and not say anything, and they won't challenge their loved ones, their friends, their family, their colleagues, whatever it is, to slow down, and they speed themselves. So once you explain, and this is why I talk about we need to win the argument around this, explain the risks, explain the consequences to them in the event of a collision, the damage they can cause themselves. And I've met drivers who subsequently had the benefit of what's happened to them to realise that if they'd have operated in hindsight, they'd have drove differently. It devastates their lives, their family lives, and so on. But again, if they started from the position as well as their points in their license, disqualification affects their employment and affects everything as well, then we might actually start to see some real change. And that's why I think with what the Met have done this year in terms of radically ramp up their speed enforcement, hopefully that starts to have an impact, and starts to sort of, and the whole sort of getting it in this space in terms of media and making the case, I think it's been a really important part of the whole strategy and what's needed. And I need you as road safety advocates in various different guises and positions of influence to shout that loudly as well, and to try and influence other places nationally. I will try and influence within Lincolnshire as an example, but I'm not the road safety lead there, so I can only speak as loudly as you. But then if we all speak loudly, then hopefully there's some success with that as well. Okay, just moving on. So uninsured drivers, just to touch on that. I don't sign up to the fact that people just forget. I've never forgot. I don't know anybody else in my family or my friend circle that forgot to insure their car. I think they uninsure it because, and there may be one or two, I just haven't met them. But I think they don't insure their vehicle because they've got a bad collision history. They've got points in their license already. They've been disqualified already. Essentially, they've got issues which make their policy expensive. And I think, or they're criminally active, or they're just a risk taker and prepared to take a risk. And all of those things go together to make them a more dangerous driver. And we know 2/3 of uninsured drivers in a bit of research we've done in London were shown to be criminally active in the last 2 years. And it isn't criminally active in the sense of we think they may have done a crime. It was, we can prove they've done a crime within the last 2 years. And a lot of that was a more serious crime as well. So we had it as a really significant part of our strategy to both fight crime and to support road danger reduction. And I think the whole uninsured, I think there's about 1 million drivers nationally uninsured. I think technology is probably the secret there. I think, there's all sorts of things that could probably happen there. But again, a greater focus nationally on this. The Motor Insurance Bureau, I have to say, are fantastic around the support they give policing. And there is lots of activity up and down the country, but 1 million drivers is far too many, and we need more resource essentially to make an impact there. We focus very much on the dangerous driver. So we introduced our road crime team. I won't labour it too much now because I know we're keen to allow questions and stuff for a period of time as well. But essentially our road crime team were drawing the link between serious crime and dangerous driving. They've only been running since, well, for example, the first 3 or 4 months, they were set up in April. The first 3 or 4 months of data I saw, a huge amount of arrests, a huge amount of vehicles seized, guns, weapons, drugs, wanted people, cash found, you name it, basically they found it. And it's a relatively small team. and they work off ANPR, they work off other stuff in terms of intelligence-led focus, but really, really successful. And that built on an operation that we used in 2019 called Road Challenge. That was essentially identifying the most dangerous drivers in London, putting them on using technology such as ANPR, and essentially being really focused around getting rid of all that noise of the other indicators that come through ANPR, and having a real focus on the right people to make the biggest impact. And it would be, I know whilst there is a Dashcam agenda item later on, if I don't say Dashcam, then I won't be true to myself. So Dashcam and Headcam, I know, Robert, you've used this phrase, is a game changer for road safety. We need it consistent across the country. We shouldn't have a postcode lottery around it. You know, manufacturers should have it as a standard fit. Insurers should incentivize its usage, and the police service should update people that report it in terms of what the broad outcome is. There may have been some changes locally around that. I don't sign up to that. We should be reporting people or updating people that encourages that reporting and encourages people to, it's rude not to as well, but it encourages future reporting and educates reporting, so nobody wastes their time if it's not good enough. We know what we're basically after, and so does the person reporting it. But we marketed this from a position of essentially, how do I put this tactfully, making sure our workload wasn't excessive in at the start of 2019, to marketing it because it was the right thing to do. And you know, the police can't be everywhere all the time, but the public can, is the mantra that's been said. And therefore we have a 24/7 capability from the public to be part of the solution to road safety, rather than people that, you know, I think if you look in parts of the country where it's not used, there's a lot of criticism around road safety. Why aren't the police doing this? Why aren't the police doing that? Look what I just saw. Well, Dashcam is the solution to that, because it gives that member of the public the opportunity to help be part of the solution, and it gives the police the opportunity to allow that as well in terms of the evidential collection. So we went from 4,000 in 2017, 5,000 in 2018, to nearly 10,000 referrals in 2019. And the last I saw, we were comfortably going to pass that this year. And that's just going to be a growing trend where it just grows and grows and grows. As more people use the kit, more people have confidence in reporting. We make the system easier for you to report. And the context to our enforcement rate, it was about 2/3 of referrals were enforced. So it does make a difference. It does allow us to take action against those people that everybody sees that are really dangerous and committing offences and are frustrated by it. Allows us to take action against them. But the biggest single win here for road safety is deterrence, because I think if I put my mind, as I try to do on occasion, into the dangerous driver's mindset, I think they will look for the police car, they will look for the speed camera, and if they see neither, they'll drive however they want to drive. So to combat that, we did use a drone in 2019. I know some other forces are using drones, so you know, it's unlikely they're going to be looking up in the air, but if we can mark it every now and then, we do that, then it's great. But more importantly, having the public, the person next to you that can enforce you, I think is a really significant change in the way that we police and the way that drivers will drive, because their mindset will be one of anybody can enforce me, so they need to be careful. I think just briefly, so all of this, and I'm going to miss out a load of bits, but all of this essentially comes around to saying London is on. So London last year had the lowest combined killed and serious injury rate on record, and this year I saw a stat go out, I think on Monday, that said we're on 75 fatal collisions for the year. That is obviously an absolutely appalling amount, but the context is we'd never previously come under 113 for a calendar year. Awful numbers, but we are the lowest that we've ever been. I think I spoke to somebody in the DFT last night who said that figure is astonishing. So I think whilst there's a huge amount to do in technology with speed limiters, bigger rollout of Dashcam, legislation with powers around, like I said, around speed, society playing their role in terms of challenging the whole culture of what I call a complacent, arrogant driving culture needs to change. There is some evidence if you move to a strategy like this, which I think could be replicated anywhere nationally, then you do make an impact. Okay. I'll end there if I can and just open up to questions then.
That's fantastic. Nice quick run through, Andy. Let's just go through some of the questions. First of all, if I can just answer, we'll ask the panelists a question from Andrea. How do we feel about failing to stop? Should there be an increase in the penalty for that? Because at the moment, there is a kind of incentive, particularly if you've been using alcohol or drugs, to leave the scene, leave someone dying. How do we on the panel feel about upping the penalty for failing to stop, failing to report, hit and run, normally referred to as? How do we feel about that, Kira? Unmute.
So sorry, can you repeat it? You broke up a
It was just, sorry, just a question to all of the panelists before we do questions to Andy, from Andrea about how do we feel about increasing the penalties for failing to stop, failing to report?
I mean, I think Andy mentioned there, deterrent is like the thing that really we need to be focusing on. And while it may seem that increasing sentences for all kinds of road crimes is a reactionary thing, I think it really has a place as a deterrent as well. And I think that's something that can be improved across the board, particularly for speeding, particularly for mobile phone use. I think it's something that needs to be addressed so massively.
Yeah, I mean, I think the road danger reduction approach is that we want to see the likelihood of being caught go up with some kind of often quite minor penalties. So, for example, with close passing of cyclists, West Midlands Police kicked that off in 2016. We gave them a special award for it. And what they do is, most of it is what they call chat on the mat, a bit of conversation, explain to people what they did wrong. And with people who are not sympathetic, cooperative, or repeat offenders, then you're looking at 3 penalty points. So not being particularly vindictive or aggressive, it's just letting people know that they shouldn't do certain things because something kind of unpleasant and inconvenient can happen to you. And it's what Andy called the being proactive, not reactive. Anything to add on that, Jenny or Victoria?
Personally, I know, for example, that the Red Chinese re-education, driver re-education, has worked quite well. I don't think Andy's got to be on that. But actually sending people back who've broken the speed limit within certain narrow parameters and education a little bit about speeding, I think has shown real results. I mean, I've spoken to people who said they've never speeded again. And also, in general, on most areas of policing and crime, I would argue actually longer, harder sentences aren't much use, because if somebody's in prison, it's like a school for criminals. But on breaking the law in driving, I do feel that losing your license should be used more often, because people get away with terrible crimes on the road, and then it's all waved away because the judge says, oh, you need your license for work. Well, they shouldn't, and have to use public transport or bikes.
Okay. Victoria, do you want to say anything before we go to Andy?
Yeah, just a quick thing. I think the sentencing of fail to stop is a particular issue, because at the moment it's maximum 6 months, and that then provides an incentive for, if you were, say, drink driving, the sentencing for drink driving is higher. So it's a particular issue with fail to stop, I would say.
Yeah. Anything, Mike? Do you want to say anything that comes to mind? I can't hear you. Still can't hear. I can't hear you.
Okay, I've got the unmute. Thank you.
All right.
So I was going to say, really, it's enforcement and risk of someone catching you. That's the biggest issue. sure, there's debate to be had about sentences, but the more chance you have of being caught, the more you're likely to be discouraged from committing the offences. And I think right now there's very little chance of being caught as a phone user.
Yep. Okay, so Andy, anything? Can I actually, just because we've got quite a lot of questions, I'm just trying to throw in a few here. Amanda asked about the possibilities of enforcing 20 miles an hour in what we're going for, which is 20 miles an hour as a sort of default speed limit in urban areas, also in villages, places where people walk, work, go to school, and so on. Ailich Murray asked, how do speeders react? And Andy Hadley's councillor in Bournemouth and Poole asked, how do you argue for resources to be allocated to speeding when you're up against the various funders and resource allocators? I think, I mean, if there's anything you want to add on that general question of deterrence, Francis Bernstein asked about increased deterrence in law or higher penalties. I think we've roughly covered that. There's some questions if you'd like, if that gives you something to talk about.
Okay, and I need to mention the A10 at some point, so I forgot to cover that in the A12. Right. But so the Amanda, I think it was, on the 20 mile an hour. So we are, like I said, we can absolutely enforce that. I think the whole debate has been had in terms of people's views on within law enforcement circles, that is, on 20 mile an hour. I certainly know when I first arrived into the command, there was a talk about, you know, is it proportionate and so on. Well, I think I said in the presentation that, you know, 30 mile an hour is the biggest in terms of the speed zone. So 20 through to 70. 30 was, certainly the time last time I checked the data, was the one with the most KSI, and 20 was the nearest to that. So that in itself legitimizes exactly why we'd want to enforce there. We've seen the sort of speeds. I think I mentioned 84 miles an hour, but it wasn't unusual. So there was lots in the 50s, lots in the 60s, lots in the 70s. And during the COVID period, some roads were actually averaging speed above the speed limit. So if you put that into context and think what the upper ends of those speeds would have been if the average is actually above the speed limit. So the whole 20 mile an hour debate, we are enforcing it. We've enforced, I think, 75 or 6 times more than previous. I think that's only going to continue to go up because there's lots of focus in those road zones now. So we're doing that. In terms of how people react, I think it goes back to the culture. They don't expect to get caught. So, and it will vary obviously on whoever it is. I mean, we caught speeders that were wanted for attempted murder, for example, this year, and that draws that link to crime. And we got people that were caught speeding for the first time and looked genuinely shocked that they'd done it. But the reality is, it's everybody's responsibility not to speed. So, you know, I just think you're going to get a variety of reactions, but the principal purpose of us is to say, this is the risk you pose. And I think that comes back to the whole debate around deterrence and argument. And I think the case that I think I said it already is around, you know, if you put yourself in the shoes of bereaved families, if you compare the road collision fatal rate to the national homicide through murder or terrorism rate, you know, that's the proportionality of what we do. And we know from the research in London that speed was a factor in just shy of 1 in 2 fatal collisions. So it's by far our biggest issue when you actually break everything down and all the causation factors down. And then when it comes to resourcing, I think this is the challenge for national road policing. I think in London, I have to say, because of TfL, we're resourced very, very well. And that allows a lot of what we just spoke, or I spoke through, to happen. I think if you look at other parts of the country, roads policing is not resourced in the way it should be. So therefore, it's for people like me to draw that link to crime. In my new job, I've already been talking about uninsured drivers and their link to crime. I've been talking about, in terms of proportionality, You know, and that goes back to the thing just now around the amount of people that die compared to other crime types, the risk it poses, the link to other crimes. So, for example, you stop that speeding driver, you find somebody wanted. The person who's stopped not wearing a seatbelt is why they're not wearing a seatbelt. Everybody else, I imagine, on this group just naturally puts it on because we're law abiding. If you don't put it on, is that an indication of what else you're up to? So my job really is to canvass the link to other crime types, the link to proportionality, and then get the resourcing properly done. I think it's a long way short of that across the country now. The HMRC have just been in there, the Independent Police Inspectorate. I know that they've reported that in the majority of forces that they looked at, resourcing was an issue. So I think, you know, there needs to be wider understanding, but we can only do that through events such as this and just keep pushing that message forward.
Thanks very much. Can I actually, I've been going through there's a lot of questions here. We may have to put those up on the websites afterwards, email people about them. What I want to ask Andy about is a very long question from Paul, who's been talking about how some police services do not have the kind of rapid response and the facility for third-party reporting in the first place. And he also mentioned the business about replying to people who've reported, both out of courtesy and because when you do that, you spread the message further. Andy and a few other police services like West Midlands, Surrey being quite good at this, one or two others, actually educating motorists as part of their social media presence and letting people know what happens, because the whole thing is we want to get this cultural change. We want to have the deterrent possibility, which you're only going to have if you let people know this is a possibility. Now, we do have some police services who aren't going ahead on this. How do we progress this, Andy? I mean, we can write to the Police and Crime Commissioner. We can, what else can we do?
So certainly, I think national leads around roads policing understand that. There's currently a roads policing review where police officers working within the Department for Transport and essentially is developing a roads policing strategy. And they're aware of all these issues, so they understand it. And hopefully their voice is heard. The issue is, I think, policing's pretty stretched, like everything. But you know, generally, I think it comes back to that proportionality piece that we spoke of around, you know, the impact to communities, the impact to families, and so on. I think government, they've got a big part to play. So Department for Transport need to recognise a strong policing unit will make a difference. I think we've shown that here. But I think ultimately there needs to be, in my personal view, is some form of coordination approach nationally in policing that says things like, yeah, we understand what our risky roads are up and down the country based on analysis of where collisions occur and the type of collisions and the impact. We understand our most dangerous drivers, so we could easily put together, you know, like in London, we targeted the top 500, maybe nationally you could target the top 5,000 or whatever. And you have that real understanding of data, which unpicks the most risky themes. And like I said, speeding will be, in my opinion, #1 on that. And therefore, if you start to target those three things, i.e. the right road at the right time, you're targeting speeding and obviously those other fatal 4 crime types, and you're targeting the right driver, you'll have an impact. So that's about how we use our resource and the method that we use it. And then in terms of Dashcam, I know I'm going to put together some form of paper that looks to recommend a national approach to Dashcam. And that takes away that postcode lottery. It would mean that we update reporting people. I think that's pretty patchy. Not every county, of course, uses Dashcam currently, but it's pretty patchy in terms of the people that do, or the counties that do, whether they update people. And like I said, I think that's just common courtesy anyway. But actually, it's about recognising that if you update people, they come back because they appreciate it and they learn from it and they know what to submit. And that's about keeping everybody safe. So people like Mikey, who are very busy in this field, thank you very much. And people always say to me, is Mikey a little bit excessive with it? And the answer is no, because actually if we had more people like Mikey, in my opinion, then you'd have a very much safer road, because if you're a law-abiding road user, why would you be concerned about Mikey being there anyway? So it's about keeping everybody safe, and I think people like Mikey play a part in that, and therefore it's about creating an environment where people can report and do have that level of service where they know if it's worked or not.
Excellent. Yeah. So that roads policing review, we definitely want to look forward to positive results from that. I think we do have to move on, although we could carry on. There are loads of questions. We do have to move on to the next thing, which will be Kira Lee with a video that's been made about her experience. Andy, do please stay if you've got the time. If not, if you want to go, you've got plenty to do. But thanks very much for your input and your updates on everything. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's. I think Victoria is going to, or is Kira going to speak, or Victoria, do you want to?
Kira is going to speak, and then I'm going to attempt to play a video from my computer. So
Thanks
over to you,
very
Kira.
much. Yeah, thank you. So I was asked to speak today about my experience. My husband Eddie was killed in 2018 by a dangerous driver. When I get asked to speak about what happened to us, I go through a little bit of a process about what I'm going to talk about. And what I do is I get myself some childcare and I go on a really long run. And during that run, I tend to come up with about 4 points that I want to discuss or talk about. And when I was thinking through, when I was running at the weekend and I was thinking through what I wanted to talk about today, and I was asked to speak about the importance of dashcam footage in a case. And I realised it's a really, really complex issue, particularly for me, because it's emotional, it's psychological, it's practical. So I started writing, and then I actually work in video news. So I decided I'd actually just put it all together into a video, because I wanted to get everything in. And sometimes I find it easier to talk about Eddie and show you Eddie at the same time, because what often happens when we talk about cases is that we lose sight of the victim, and we focus on who's left, what can be done. But actually, I think our case resonates so much because of who Eddie was. So yeah, so hopefully I've got it all into this video, but I do feel I need to kind of say it's really sad. I watched it back yesterday, and it is really sad, and I feel like this is a really positive webinar about how we're going to make positive change. But what you can hopefully take from it is that even in the worst case scenario, which we are, there is a positive thing to take from the fact that we had access to video evidence of Eddie's death. So even though it is devastatingly sad, there is a positive to it. So if we can find a positive in the worst case scenario, then think what we could do for the cases that are, lighter in terms of the outcome, but the changes that we can make to people's driving and people reporting bad driving. So hopefully this video works. I don't know if there's any sound, Victoria. I think if anyone else is getting sound.
Sorry about that. I'm going to try this again, and with the sound, hopefully.
I've worked with pictures and video for most of my career. As a journalist, I mostly write words to pictures. And when I trained, I knew I wanted to work in an area of news where freedom from bias underpins everything. And with video news, there's sort of less opportunity for interpretation and opinion. The video tells its own story. When I went on maternity leave, a colleague said to me, make sure you take lots of videos of the baby. Don't just take stills. I must have really listened to his advice, because in the 30 months we had together as a little family, we captured so much. Since Eddie was killed, these videos have taken on a new role. They've become our son's memories of his father. They're his only insight into the language that he spoke before English. Seren's first word was bicycle in Cantonese. I took this photo of us about 10 days before Eddie was killed. It's the last photograph of us as a family. I only took it because I was going out for the evening and I wanted to check my makeup. I had no idea how significant this image would become. Just 48 hours before Eddie was hit, we'd spent the evening on the water where we live. I made dinner for us to take up to a little sandy section of river with our friends. And on the way back, Seren was on the front of my board and he dropped his dinosaur in the water. Eddie and I both tried to reach it, but he was on his racing kayak and the competitive moment led to him capsizing. Seren and I laughed about it as we floated around, waiting for him to empty his boat. I pretended to take a picture of our son while actually trying to capture Eddie so that we could laugh about it later when he was seeing the funny side of things. This was the last picture I captured of my husband. The next time his image would be viewed on a screen was from a multicam setup on a Harrods van travelling in the lane next to him on the M4. As you can imagine, Harrods vans don't just have any old dash cam. They've got really high-spec technology with audio and multiple angles. Eddie was hit by a distracted driver as he queued at the back of standstill traffic on the M4. He was riding his commuter motorbike. The video that captured Eddie's death has had far-reaching implications. I'll only be able to touch on a few of them today, but what I hope to convey is just how important camera evidence is, not just for achieving a conviction, but how it can help the bereaved. If I describe two scenarios to you, one where there's video evidence of Eddie's death and one where there isn't, it's a bit like the movie Sliding Doors, but with no happy ending. There is, however, a scenario that is infinitely better, one where I am able to emerge from the ordeal significantly stronger. One of the most painful concepts when faced with the horror that Eddie, who was a phenomenally competent and safe road user, had been killed in this way, was that I would have to hear interpretations of what had happened to him. The thought of eyewitness testimony, no matter how reliable, was a real struggle for me. I needed facts and exact details. I needed science. I needed measurements. I needed the truth. When we fall in love or we have children, we just want to protect them. It's such an overwhelming feeling. If the person we love has been killed, that feeling of seeking justice for them is an extension of that need to protect. The thought that there's also an offender in the equation who is likely to lie about what's happened feels like an additional attack on the person that you love. The driver who killed Eddie began his interview by lying. That was until he was shown the video. A video of Eddie that showed what would later be described in court as exemplary riding. It showed Eddie slowing to a stop around 5 meters behind the car in front, and it showed the driver slamming into Eddie at speed. And on further viewing, it revealed a van travelling in the lane next to the offender with the same logo on its side. Another van from the same company. They were work friends. They think the driver was distracted away from the road for at least 16 seconds. And that was enough. It was enough truth to stop anyone from being able to add another interpretation of what happened. The CPS then made a quick decision to proceed with the most serious charge of causing death by dangerous driving. The driver entered a guilty plea at the earliest opportunity. I am quite sure that without the video evidence, the case would have gone to trial. A traumatic experience in itself. Add into that, I was trying to raise a 2-year-old on my own while commuting to my office on the other side of London several times a week. I think a trial would have finished me off. A judge was able to view all angles of the video alongside the forensic investigator's report in order to sentence the driver. And
And these are just the very basic outcomes of that footage. They're the outcomes that we assume are the most important in a road death. But for me, it had other purposes too. Obtaining footage at an early part of the investigation allowed the civil case proceedings to begin. The video is so damning and clear in its terms of liability that there would be no disputing it. As many Road Peace members know, the civil case is extremely long and painful, but it's a practical step that helps people like me survive financially. If I'd been unable to return to work, I don't know if I could have afforded to stay in my home. And one of the reasons our son has stayed so utterly secure since Eddie's death is that we stayed living in the place that we love, in the unique and adventurous outdoor life that we'd chosen for him. But what happens to the family who are left trying to prove the truth? What happens to the kids that are forced to move because there is no financial compensation for them when a case falls apart? What level of stress does that take a grieving and traumatised family to? I also want to talk about the psychological impacts of there being video of the end of my husband's life. The concept might seem horrific, but actually it gave me a level of control that I needed. Because the driver had entered a guilty plea, I was able to choose not to watch it. I was then able to ask every single question I needed answers to. I still wanted to know angles and speed. I wanted to know where Eddie hit the car and how he hit the car. With knowledge of what was in the footage, I was able to spend time with Eddie's body and my aunt, who's a trauma consultant, and turn over every possible stone to feel assured that Eddie didn't suffer. I also need to be able to answer Seren honestly when he asks me details about the crash, which he does already. Had there been no video evidence, I would have had to rely on snippets of information from strangers telling me how my husband met his death. That video actually gave Eddie a level of dignity that he was denied in so many other aspects of his death. The footage of the crash made the criminal proceedings as bearable as they could possibly be, and that's a scenario that truly allowed me to stay sane. The alternative would have put me in quite a vulnerable position. I was living on my own with a 2-year-old, with no family close by. If I was unable to cope, what kind of pressure could that have put on other services and charities? If I was left fighting for justice, I don't know if I could have come out the other side. I have a level of clarity over Eddie's death that's allowing me to build a new life. I'm angry and I'm desperately sad, and I will always fight for the areas of the system that are wrong, but I will also focus on the positive changes that we can make. Just as the videos that we took of our life are part of our story, the video of Eddie's death plays its part too. My son may choose to see it when he's older, he probably won't, but at least he gets a choice in a life where so much has already been taken from him.
Thanks very much, Kira. Thanks for sharing that with us. Shall we go straight on to Bryn of Next Space? Unless there's anything specific you want to say now, Victoria?
Well, I think what we can do is we can do questions for Kira and Mike and Bryn and Adrian, perhaps once everyone's finished speaking, and we can do questions about dashcam footage all together at the end, maybe. Thank you so much, though, Kira. It's really touching, and I think you know, it shows the importance, you know, when a fatal crash does happen, of having dashcam footage. So thank you very much for sharing that.
No problem.
Thanks. So can we go straight on to Bryn Brooker of Next Space Dashcams? Thanks,
Robert. Well, firstly, Kira, I'd just like to reiterate those comments from everybody. Really amazing video. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen with everybody. Hopefully everybody will be able to see this. I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to try and stick to that as best I can to go through some insights into the technology of dashcams, why people are using dashcams, and some work that we've been doing as a private company to help people understand dashcams and further their use and further technology. So essentially, people are using dash cams as an independent witness on the road, proving non-fault. There are other reasons that people are buying dash cams, though: insurance discounts, maintaining NCD, no claims discount. But we're seeing the growth of dash cams at the moment very, very rapidly, as more and more people are understanding the benefits to them. They understand that it protects them as a driver. You can have this level of protection. You can prove that an incident wasn't your fault. And the way that a dash cam like this will record is very different to the way a GoPro or an action camera records. If you have an incident, the camera detects the jolt of that incident and will automatically save the file for you, so that you've always got the footage there should you need it. There are more benefits coming on as technology changes. There are extra benefits. Parking mode is getting a lot better. So outside of road safety, when your car is parked, you can be your dash cam can automatically turn itself on and record if somebody bumps into your vehicle while you're shopping, for example. And because of all of this, we're seeing it's about 3.5 million dash cams on the UK roads at the moment, we estimate. And for me, that's essentially 3.5 million pairs of eyes looking at other road users as you're driving around. I won't go through all of this in detail. I will share this deck afterwards so that people can look at it in more detail if you wish. But I just wanted to give you a quick history. Dashcams, they haven't been around that long. We launched our first range in 2014. But some of the key highlights, the first prosecution was way back in 2015 on a NEXT-based dashcam. And then over here, around 2016-17, we realized, like Paul has mentioned in the comments earlier, the kind of disparity between a dashcam user and the police. And so back then, there was no system at all, apart from a few forces, to upload your video to a police force. So we got involved. We thought, you know, if there's nobody able to do it, we'll just get involved and we'll help out as best we can. And I'll come on to a bit more of that in a minute. More recently, we're launching dash cams now with emergency SOS systems, which means if you have a crash and you're somewhere where there is nobody else to help you, your dash cam can actually phone the emergency services on your behalf or contact them on your behalf, send them your things like your blood type, your GPS location, and you can be they can come to you without anybody phoning 999. So it's just kind of a very similar system that you have in a brand new car. If you have an accident in a brand new car, it will phone the emergency services for you. This technology is now coming into dash cams. There's a video about that. I've skipped past it. Again, I'll let everybody have a look at that system at their own leisure. As a brand, we're obviously a UK brand, and therefore we have quite a good presence in UK press, and we do highlight a lot of the cases of bad driving, and we are able to influence the way people see dash cams, driving safety, and we do put a lot of work and effort into this area because, again, as a private company, we feel that we can do our bit to improve road safety. Just for everybody's understanding, this is our statistics this year. They do include product, so you have to kind of take the product out of it to a certain extent, but there's 244 pieces of coverage and about 5.4 million estimated views of all of our coverage, which includes things like improving road safety with some of the things I'm going to talk about shortly. One of the things that we've really tried to further, and something that we've worked very, very hard on the last 4 or 5 years, is the National Dashcam Safety Portal. There's been a great amount of work with forces like the Met, West Midlands, West Mercia, where they have portal systems or video upload systems in place. But there are a number of forces, like Paul's previously mentioned, where they just don't have anything. So as a brand, as a private company, we've decided to, you know what, let's help forces if we can, give them for free a system where they can upload video footage. So we have gone to as many forces as we can, and we will keep on going to as many forces as we can to offer for free, 100% free, a secure data service. We've paid for something called egress, where the police can have an egress login. They can have an ability for the users to send them video footage, and this is something that we've seen work amazingly well. In total, so this is looking at all egress forces. There have been over 20,000 public uploads. In lockdown, as we mentioned earlier, as there were less people on the roads, but the uploads to the whole of the portal, the whole of the egress system, was increased by 78%. The really encouraging thing for me is 50% of all of the uploads that come from the public to this egress system have resulted in some form of prosecution. That varies from just a warning letter all the way through to a prosecution in court. And currently, 33 local police forces are using this free platform. If any force comes to me and says, can I get in? Then the answer is, from my point of view, yes, we can help you do it. There are some forces that pay for it themselves off their own back if they want to, or some forces that Nextbase have paid for it, and you can use the free paid for version that we offer out. It's exactly the same. The real kicker for me is by having this platform in place, when a user uploads the video, they are also asked to upload and fill out a witness statement. And this was done in conjunction with the police, so that when the footage is seen by the police, their witness statement is with it side by side. So it's a very quick decision. Do we want to take action, or do we not want to take action? And from our calculations, that's saved over 170,000 hours of police time, and has dramatically sped up the process of prosecuting dangerous drivers. I know that this has saved lives. I can't prove it, but the sheer numbers of prosecutions that have come through this system, and it includes all the work, all the police forces around the country that use the system. There must have been somebody who's gone through the system and realised that that was a bad mistake, and they won't make that mistake again. So this is something I'm really proud of, and I've been working on it personally for a number of years. Again, we do push it out to press, and we've got a lot of coverage for it on its own. This portal's it's been on the BBC, it's been in national press, but it's something that we're working on, and wherever we can, we'll try and help the police enable people to send them in footage. And if there are still forces that bury their heads in the sand, or don't accept it, or can't accept it, and I don't honestly know why, but I would love to help if possible. What's planned for the future? Touching on a couple of points that have already been mentioned, for dashcams, we'll get higher resolution. We're seeing 4K resolution already. Higher resolution means you can make out number plates better. You can make out people if you need to prove who was driving, things like that. Having that higher resolution is going to help in more cases. 360-degree view is also going to come very shortly. So instead of a dash cam like this one, just facing forwards, and having an option of one facing backwards, technology has moved on so that we can have cameras. It will be 2 cameras, but they are able to cover the whole 360 with just 2 lenses. They'll also be able to contact you, so warnings to your phone if your car is hitting a car park. And then also, like I say, we're further developing the Dashcam portal, or whatever portal system the forces you choose to use. I know Andy Cox has been working very hard on that, and we'll support whatever the forces you wish to use going forwards. There is also something which is quite interesting being run by West Mercia, something called Morse. This is where they are looking into the reasons that people are speeding and committing offences. For example, was a driver speeding because they were under the influence of drugs and alcohol? And why were they under the influence of those drugs and alcohol? Was it because they have mental health issues or issues at home? And that is something that we're working with West Mercia on, because can we fix, or can they fix, that core issue? So if you fix the core issues of issues in the home, does that then help them not speed in the future? It's all well and good perhaps targeting speeders and re-educating, but can we re-educate and also solve the core issue if there is another issue behind that that problem at the forefront of it? That's it. I think I've kept closely to my 10 minutes. Thank you very much. And if there's any questions, I'll catch them at the end.
Thanks very much, Bryn. Just as we go over to Paul from Madison Cycles, importer of Cyclic, just to point out that also CCTV can be used, point made by Heidi Moxham, one of the police officers following us and attending today. So this is all part of stuff which has been happening for a while and needs to be pushed up to the next level. I think we really do need to focus on getting police services to have a very efficient, effective way of accepting and promoting third-party reporting. Paul, sorry, Adrian. Beg your pardon, Adrian.
Yeah. That's okay. Paul couldn't make it, but what we've done, really, I want to say everything that Bryn said really is that Cyclic is a dash cam for bicycles. So a front and rear product. So I'm going to show you this video. It does include some footage and also a very similar website where footage can be uploaded to. That shows about accident hotspots, that sort of stuff. So I'll start the video, share the screen, and then you can follow on from there. Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Hancock, and I am Cyclic brand manager here in the UK. I work on behalf of Madison Distribution in the UK, large cycling distributor. I'm here today to talk about these little guys, these little camera light combinations called Cyclic. Apologies I can't be there in person. This is actually a recorded message, so I'm not live. My colleague and boss, Adrian Phillips, is on the call. So if anything should go wrong with the recording, or if anyone has any questions at the end of the session, he's the man, and he's a good guy to talk to about the whole cameras. He's very passionate about it as well. So yeah, basically, so yeah, we're going to talk about these, talk about our cameras. 2 offerings here. We've got the Fly 12 and the Fly 6 safety cameras, and they are dubbed a Dashcam, engineered for cyclists. So to keep an eye on us on the roads, make sure drivers are behaving, make sure we're all kept safe while riding our bikes around the country. We've got a couple of videos to show you as well. So we'll start off with a video straight off the bat. This is just the introduction to Cyclic, the products, what we're all about. And then we'll crack on and we'll take a closer look. See you in a sec. So hopefully that gave you a nice little insight into the company, a little bit about what we're all about, you know, the key features of our cameras and things like that. But basically, yeah, these are the two products we currently have. Cyclic is an Australian brand based out in Perth in Western Australia. They've been around for around 10 years. And they started off as a Kickstarter company. Basically, the idea, the founder of the company, he got himself into a bit of a situation in Western Australia. He was out one day and he was cycling along, all, you know, minding his own business in around his local area, and a pickup truck approached him from behind, and a bunch of lads on the back of this truck had catapults, and they started firing ball bearings of all things at this chap. One hit him right on the backside, and it actually knocked him off his bike, and he had quite a crash, and he wasn't seriously injured, but he was definitely hurt, and the car sped off and was never to be seen again. And this was kind of like a bit of a eureka moment for him. He thought, do you know what, I want something on the back of my bike that can record who's coming up approaching me, because I can't see what's happening behind me. I need my eyes behind me. So that's how the original Fly 6 safety camera was sort of conceived. Obviously, as technology improves, battery life improves, etc., we, you know, obviously the products do get better, and now we're on our sort of, well, this is the second generation of our Fly 6 CE. This is the 5th camera in their production range. Yeah, and things move on, and it's super lightweight, super small, great battery life, brilliant quality HD recording, and all sorts of various smart features on the cameras. So yeah, so that's the main story really. And you know, it's kind of booming. It's an international company. There's distribution in most countries. We're doing very well over here in the UK. We've got various things going on over here, and yeah, no, it's a great company. So we're happy to be involved, and happy to share this sort of stuff with you. During the pandemic, during sort of the COVID-19 times we're in, we've actually seen a massive boom in cycling. That's fair to say, and you know, it's fairly covered in the press that cycling is actually booming at this sort of time. You know, as working for our sort of distribution company, Madison, we have just had a fantastic time actually selling products and you know, getting people on their bikes and getting people riding, which is great. But this is actually going to potentially have further problems down the line. Obviously, the more cyclists on the streets, on the roads, we could even have, you know, more incidents, more sort of negative connotations around cycling. You know, there is obviously between certain members of the car driving community, there's a bit of a loggerhead sometimes between cyclists, and that's fair to say, I think. So yeah, all these new cyclists on the roads, potentially not as experienced as your older commuters, there may be a little bit of issues, and this is where this sort of product could actually come in really work really well. The conflicts on the road is something that is really part of cyclist DNA. You know, this is predominantly a safety product. That's what it's designed for. And you know, I'm gonna play you a video right now, and I've got a quick warning. It's the footage is quite shocking. There is a quite serious accident, but it is essentially the reality of the world we live in. You know, a lot of drivers, a lot of people are kind of don't concentrate on the things. You know, people might have phones in their hands, listening to music, chatting away on their hands-free devices and things like that. So potentially the concentration isn't there. But hey, I'll play this video. You have a look, and we'll have a little discussion afterwards and see what you think. So as you can see, that's pretty shocking. I do remember the first time I actually watched that. I had some quite large headphones, and my computer was turned up pretty loud, and just the sort of crunching of the bicycle as it was getting here was pretty shocking, to be honest. I just want to let you know that the person involved in the accident, the person was actually hit off the bike. Yeah, they suffered a few cuts and bruises and I believe a broken arm, but actually managed to walk away from that, which is quite amazing, really. The driver, that footage was actually used to send into the authorities, into the police, and the driver was prosecuted based on this video. It turns out that he was on his phone while driving, wasn't concentrating as he ran at the bend, and obviously ploughed straight through the cyclist, really. So that is where these products, as shocking as it is, that is kind of the reality, and we don't want that to happen. The sort of graphics on that video, the upride graphics you saw, is actually a website that Cyclic run to basically be almost like a database of close passes, of accidents, of near misses, things like that, to collate. So, for example, if a cyclist is new to an area, they can jump on this upride website and see, if there's any sort of areas that they may be passing through that might have accidents in the last week or months, so they can potentially reroute, avoid that area to avoid collisions, avoid accidents. So yeah, that's the reality. And I want to have a quick talk about the close pass operations that many police forces have been running and are running up and down the country, to basically educate drivers on how to behave around cyclists. As I mentioned earlier, as we're getting more and more cyclists on the road, this is going to be more important. And those guys have done some fantastic work, and it really is changing the way people are behaving around cyclists. So the West Midlands Police up in Birmingham sort of pioneered this close pass operation. The whole idea is a plainclothes officer on a bicycle would ride up and down the same stretch of street with a camera device. In that particular case, Cyclic cameras. We are somehow, we are the unofficial sort of camera provider of these close pass operations, which is great. So yeah, sorry, the idea is a plainclothes officer would ride up and down the same stretch of street, essentially waiting for a driver to do a close pass or a near miss or reckless behaviour. And the idea is they'll pull him over and give him an option. They can either educate him or her how to behave around a cyclist, or issue a penalty point. And the fact that the incident is recorded on our devices, that can be played back and shown to the driver. So again, to educate them to move on, really, and make everything a bit of a safer place for everyone. So that's the goal of Cyclic. That's the goal of what the police are trying to do over here, and we're really happy and proud to be involved. So yeah, that's about it from me, really, to be honest. Little quick update of what's going on, and if you have any questions, I don't know if there's going to be time. As I say, I'm not in the room, but my colleague and boss Adrian Phillips might be able to take over and take it from here. So again, thank you very much for having us. Thank you for the time you guys have taken to listen to, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot there. Let's go straight on to Mike. As we're running a little bit behind. On to Mike.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, so I thought I'd start with, who am I? I'm just an ordinary person. I'm probably not the most prolific reporter to the Met's reporting system, although I do quite a lot. I think in roughly the last 3 years, I've reported about 600 drivers, which sounds an awful lot, but that's less than one a day. And it's really easy to catch one phone driver a day in most days in London, as I think you're probably all aware of. Most of those were prosecuted or warned, at least. In 2019, 5 of those drivers were disqualified. I suspect there are probably more than that. I just didn't get told about them. And I was most well known for several videos: the Doctors and Mercedes Man on the wrong side of the road in Regent's Park, and more recently, Guy Ritchie. So what do? Basically, I ride around to work on errands and shopping and that kind of thing, and I'm running cameras all the time. So it seems that for some reason, cyclists are a trigger for bad drivers and bad driver behavior. So it's very easy for many cyclists to see such bad driving. I report these drivers onto the Dashcam portal. I'm willing to go to court, and I think it's somewhere between 1% and 5%. I haven't of cases that I have to go to court. The GoPro I use, I like Cycle IQ, by the way. I'd be using them if I didn't have dynamo lights on my bike. But this GoPro Hero 9 gives such incredibly good footage that it's what I use mounted on my head for phone drivers. So I also, after the justice process is finished, I put the driver video on YouTube, which is uncomfortable for them, I think. And anyway, I have several objectives there. It shows the driver and his friends that, you know, the road isn't a private place. Their car isn't private. They're doing things in the public space, and their behavior can be questioned and examined in that space. It shows everyone else that it's worth using cameras because cameras have real results when there's bad driving. And it also helps other people find repeat bad drivers. I've got a number of drivers who've been seen more than once, either on my channel or on mine and other people's channels. You quickly get to see people who the police can then pay attention to. I'm sure the police would know anyway, just from their databases. So history. I think we all started with cameras, at least the people I was involved with around 2006, starting off by watching Lucas Brunel, who's very exciting, but maybe not the best advert for road safety. He's worth a look on YouTube though. But yes, around that time, the first small digital cameras came out, and we suddenly realized this is very powerful. I think back then everyone had experiences of police saying, well, it's your word against his, there's no evidence. How can you prove what happened? The cyclist with you might not be a good witness because he's a cyclist. So we realized that cameras would change that. At that point, all we could do is report only the more serious incidents at a police station, which would take quite a lot of time, hours sometimes. Or direct to companies. Driving in a livery van suddenly became a lot less safe because of the people running cameras. Then the second step in history was that RoadSafe was started. So the idea there was really that group of officers would look at road safety issues, quite often around road infrastructure design and that kind of thing. But it also moved on to sending warning letters to drivers who were caught by camera cyclists. And I thought that was quite effective. It's not a prosecution, there was no punishment, apart from the YouTubing that most of us would do. But we had quite a lot of behavior improvement. Again, we saw drivers in repeat appearances, and very often the next appearance after their warning, they were considerably better behaved. And then more recently, RoadSafe moved on to this general reporting system, which was really, really reassuring. It's the first time I felt like I actually mattered, like I was actually a normal person that the police would listen to and take my allegations seriously. And then more and more of us started seeing prosecutions going ahead and getting results. So I think everybody started increasing their reporting rate, and more people took up cameras. Yeah, and then I thought sort of with part of this, I realized that it's not just reporting these people myself that have directly affected my own safety, but I could also now report people who hadn't affected my safety, like phone drivers, like the wrong side drivers in Regent's Park. So I could easily spend a few minutes on the way to or from work and catch some drivers who may have thought they were quite anonymous, quite invisible, and would never be caught using their phone, for example. And the last part of this is that the results from the Met reporting system have let us learn what you need for prosecution. Because you'll find in some cases the prosecution can't go ahead just because you haven't got sufficient evidence. So it basically taught us camera cyclists to become very much more particular about what evidence we would report and how to capture that evidence. Of course, there's a lot of us, and we correspond and talk amongst each other, so we learn from the things that we all encounter. Okay, so then there's the process of reporting. So basically, I get home, I take the batteries out of the camera, put them on charge, I put the memory cards in the computer and import them. And then I've highlighted clips by pressing a highlight button on the camera. It's a matter of extracting those. and then getting the details of each incident. So time code, vehicle registration mark, the location and that kind of thing. I put that into a file name in a text file, and then I put all the videos for that incident in that project folder. And you then got to clip the video, render it, and report on the online forum. Sorry, on the online med forum. CycleGaz, who you might know on YouTube, has a good video describing how to deal with that form, so it's worth going to his channel. At the end of that, I then upload the video file and download my summary statement and enter it all into a spreadsheet. When you're doing a lot of drivers, you kind of have to use a spreadsheet, otherwise you just cannot remember what happened and when. There are some weaknesses with the Met system. They don't like to deal with tailgating, probably because it's fairly minor for someone in a car. It's not minor when you're on a bicycle. Left hooks, particularly across cycle superhighways, are often just dropped. I'm not sure why. I believe the workers in the traffic online reporting system are very overloaded, and they're desperate for more resources, so people and computing. And at the moment, they can't really update us. And at the moment, offenders sometimes do get details of us as reporters. I think mostly it happens when you've gone to court, because I don't think there's any protection for witnesses there. I'm not sure that's exactly the same for police officers who attend court, but that's maybe something that needs to be discussed. Okay, and last, yeah, my thoughts were really on what the future might hold. One of this is that more Dutch-style cycling infrastructure is the key, I believe. There's quite good evidence to suggest that segregated cycle facilities lead to drastic fatalities in all road users, not just cyclists. So drivers, pedestrians, disabled users, etc. From what I understand, Dash and CycleCam reporting is rapidly increasing in popularity. It still hasn't stopped exploding. So more of that is needed. And as I think someone else mentioned, we need a much more unified approach across the whole of the UK. Because lots of police forces are between mediocre to absolutely awful when it comes to reporting. I think we need automated mobile phone cameras as they've rolled out in Australia. Yeah, more enforcement really. And also perhaps the speed limiting technology is coming from the EU. I find that quite interesting. And last of all, I've kind of been looking into running a mobile computer with some sort of citizen-based crowdsourced ANPR, that's automated number plate recognition. I should imagine that cyclists carrying sort of a black box like that could pick up a lot of data about bad driving. But that's maybe for the future. Yeah, and apart from that, really, that's all I really had to say. I'm open to questions. I think they're going to do them all at once, though, so I'll leave that up to Bob and Vicky. Thank you very much for having me on here.
That is splendid. Thanks so much, Mike. Thank you. I like the way you say that's all, as if it was just a few bits and pieces. I mean, it's just absolutely dramatic. Yeah, third-party reporting. Andy at the beginning said that I've said it's a game changer. The people who told me it was a game changer were West Midlands Police Road Harm Prevention Team, and it fits in with everything. Just let's go over a few questions while we can. A lot of people have been questions about how drivers often do something wrong because they just don't understand where cyclists are allowed to be, are entitled to be, and been suggestions there should be public education films and so on, as there have been in the past. What is happening now, I touched on it before, is that a number of police social media accounts do say, look, you should have been doing this, you should have been doing that, etc. They do have that kind of educational effect. Don't forget that now social media is taking over from a lot of traditional advertising. One thing I would say is that traditional advertising hasn't actually been that successful. It does need to be linked in with enforcement. that's something I would say. Other questions have been about, should there be a screen on the front so that you can see what's happening behind on a camera light or on a dash cam? Linking in with ANPR, you should know what that is, automatic number plate recognition. There could be pushback from that because of cloned plates, problems with that. Any questions, any responses from other panel people about where you see us going forward on the whole third-party reporting thing? I will just say that it does seem to be that we really need to crack on with getting a unified response from all police services. That needs to be a big focus for us. We have been Secretariat for West Midlands Police Road Harm Prevention Team, and we do updates of what police services are doing in terms of policing close passing, third-party reporting, etc., etc. Let that go a bit during the last year. I think we need to carry on with that, not to sort of tell police services off, but to say, look, you know, come on, this is important. This is a way you can do it. This is good practice. This is what the Met did. This is what West Midlands Police do. You can do these things. It needn't cost that much. It's helpful. It gets the message across. It's important. So my particular interest is in having mandatory dash cams and having them facing inward as well. Okay, any views on all those things? First of all, from Andy.
And not really, just views that I've articulated before, really. That I think, you know, I do believe there's a role for dashcam to be standard fit in new cars. I do think there's a role for insurers to incentivise, much in the same way they do a black box currently. I do absolutely think there's a need for a national consistent approach to dashcam. So, and I'm advocating that, and I'm going to put forward some proposals for that nationally. That will take some time to deliver, but essentially you shouldn't have, it's a very straightforward system, so why can't we be consistent across the country? When I was in London, I used to say London's drivers drive elsewhere and vice versa. So there's an incentivized benefit to road safety wherever you are to support this approach, and that works in every county. So very much an advocate of it, as you know, and very much key that we set ourselves almost like a code of practice really for how we update people and how we interact with the people reporting it, because actually the system should be easy to use, and we should easily be able to update them and let you know how you're getting on with it.
Let's have other views about ways we see of moving forward in that whole area. Bryn, just
yeah, I mean, I'm going to probably throw a bit of a controversial thought in there, in that even from a dashcam brand, I'm going to say that I wouldn't go as far to say that dashcams should be mandatory. Mandatory new cars, maybe, yes, but mandatory to all drivers. My thought, and this is probably a personal thought more than anything else, is at the moment, people are buying dashcams because they want to use the dashcam to keep themselves safe. So it's their item, their device, their footage, and then they do what they like with that footage. And that means we're getting a kind of great footage through, and we're able to get some great prosecutions. The second that we flip it around and say you must have something to people, and you force it on them, there is always a pushback, and people, at the moment, the vast majority of the public are very for dashcam use. They understand why they're good. They are buying them because they realise that's good. But the second we flip that round, I'm concerned that we would, the reaction would be, no, I'm not having that forced on me. I don't want to have that. Now, that may be very different if you are talking about perhaps drivers who are lorry drivers, fleet drivers, people driving for a business use. So maybe there is an argument to say that if you're a business driver, a lorry driver, then yes, maybe they should be mandatory there. But when you're a private citizen, then it becomes a little bit of a grey area. So I would just say maybe mandatory. There's maybe at the moment maybe a couple of steps down the line.
Interesting point there, that when it comes to cycle lights and helmet cams and whatnot, I think it is important also that, you know, if people want to use them, great, but you shouldn't have to feel that in order to just ride your bike down to the shops, you have to click on a lot of expensive kit. You know, it's not an incredibly hazardous thing to ride a bike. So just a point there. Jenny, anything about what you feel about dash cams, head cams, and so on?
I think anything that catches dangerous drivers and prevents injuries and deaths is fantastic. I'm going to have to go, I'm afraid. I'm really sorry. I've got another event.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Jenny. Thanks for staying with us. That's great.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny. Kira, and then Mike, about dash cams, head cams.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, what I was trying to say earlier is just how important it is. In my case, it was just, I mean, it meant so much, which I outlined in that video. But I think what we probably need to look at is making it cooler to report things. It's got a bit of a bad reputation. And I think there's, you know, there's two sides to that. I think it's, as various people have mentioned, if it's fed back, how that footage is being viewed and what action's been taken, it will empower the public to feel that they're playing a role. It's been on my to-do list for so long to get in touch with Harrods and try and explain to them just how important that footage was from their van, and not just to have any footage, but to have such high level footage that's didn't just help me, that actually saved, you know, eyewitnesses having to go through quite the traumatic experience of having to give evidence in court. They didn't need to, even though we had strong eyewitness testimony, they weren't required to you know, stand in court and give that evidence. And that's really important. And that's, you know, just from that one piece of evidence, I just think, you know, it's just really important.
Important point. Any immediate steps for the future? Adrian, do you want to say anything about what's happening in terms of your tech?
Yes, there's a smaller, lighter unit coming out for the rear, and obviously there was a question there about mountings. There's also various different mountings becoming available for racks, for seat stays, because obviously that real estate on the seat post, depending upon your leg length, can become quite restrictive as to what you can have on there. So, and obviously the upright site, it's making it much easier to upload all sorts of footage on there. I mean, if you go on and have a look, you can see all sorts of weird and wonderful things going on, as well as the, you know, the bad driving elements. And I think, you know, the education that the police are offering with Operation Close Pass has definitely had an effect, yeah, especially in the West Midlands. I mean, that was the one where we saw it first, but we have around about, I think it's 23 forces at the moment have got cyclic cameras and are rolling out the Close Pass, and we've had 3 or 4 more local police authorities recently as well come to us for cameras. So it's definitely stretching sort of nationwide now, which is a real positive thing.
Excellent. Can I just ask Victoria if she wants to say anything, because we're beginning to lose people and we have been going for an hour and 3
Yes, we're wildly over time, aren't we? So yeah, I think we'll probably just leave it there. I think I'll say one quick thing, which is that
I want to say one quick thing as well after you do your quick thing.
Okay, well, we'll make sure they're both quick then. I think there's a lot to be said for publicising the fact that you can upload dashcam footage. So I think it's a lot about drivers thinking that this could happen more than anything else, which then improves safety so much. So yeah, that's the quick thing there. Bob, you go.
I have something to add, if I may.
Yes, please. Yes, Mike. Yeah.
I was going to say there is in case it wasn't clear to everyone, I'm a massive fan of the Metropol system. I only highlighted the weaknesses just because there are areas where I see some chance for improvement. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is when you do make video like this public, you do open yourself up to a massive amount of abuse. Support too. Luckily, the support I've had has been very good. I think some of you have seen some of the horrendous abuse I've copped online. It's pretty shocking, really. And last off, yes, I feel so much for Kira. You know, I lost my dad to a drink driver a long time ago now, so it kind of brought a lot of those feelings back. And additionally, I have footage of a young lad who's riding a scooter, who some weeks after I filmed him ended up dying in a scooter crash. I feel very mixed about that, and what can I say? His family, anyway, were glad that I had some footage of him riding his motorbike.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for everybody. What I'm getting from this is there's a big interest in this area. We don't want to just do this as a webinar and kind of forget about things. We want to keep this going, keep the initiative going. We've had a lot of interest. We've recorded all this. We've got record of all the questions and answers. There's a lot more to be said. It will be coming out on the websites of both Road Peace and Road Danger Reduction Forum, as well as our Twitter feeds. We'll be grabbing, I'll try and write some kind of summary, I think. And it's something to be pushed forward in both the real and the virtual worlds. And we want to, finally, I want to thank everybody who's taken part. I know for a lot of us, it's quite difficult to talk about some of these experiences, brings back a lot of stuff, as I can see from what's been happening on the chat. And thanks to all the hardworking professionals, thanks to police services, thanks to Andy, thanks very much for all your input. We look forward to working with you all in the future. And don't forget next week, where we're going to be talking specifically about community involvement with low traffic neighborhoods and speeding, which covers the same sort of issues in a slightly different way. So thanks very much, and we will crack on. All the best.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
a big thank you to our sponsors as well. Thank you.
And thank you to the sponsors.
Yes, big thank you to the sponsors.